Welcome, everybody, to the HempBuild Podcast. We have a long-time face in the hemp building market, and that's Mattie Mead with Hempitecture. They've been around. They are the OGs, the original gangsters in this space, and were very active right from the beginning when the Farm Bill made it possible to grow and to cultivate, and they were right there at the leading edge and the bleeding edge of everything. And what I like about bringing them to you, the architects and those who are specifying materials on job sites. Mattie knows the language. That's his background. I'll let him introduce himself as well as colleagues along. Mattie, you want to just give yourself an introduction and let people know? What I like to start with is your backstory. I've heard you tell this before, and it's a great one, and I want everybody to start visualizing themselves in their journey and how it related to someone's journey like your own, and then we can jump right in and get into some of the nuts and bolts and some of the good stories that are currently active with you, because you guys have a lot of great momentum that's ready for the marketplace.
Awesome. Great, Ray. Well, thanks for having us here. Nice to see you, Ray. Nice to see you, Gene. We're really excited to share a bit more about the Hempitecture story. First, I'll introduce myself and a bit of my backstory. I'm Mattie Mead. I'm the founder and CEO of Hempitecture. We're looking forward today to sharing a bit about our product roadmap, how our products are used, but also set the stage for the natural fiber insulation market as a whole. And to understand that natural fiber insulation market as a whole today and looking forward, I think it's important to look back and understand where we came from. Ray, you mentioned the 2018 Farm Bill. Hempitecture was actually founded about 5 years before the federal Farm Bill was passed in 2018, dating back to my time as an architecture student in 2012, 2013. I was really excited about the potential of natural materials to replace conventionally used building materials. And that all ties back to a question. What did we build with before the Industrial Revolution? And why are buildings and their operations responsible for so much of our carbon dioxide emissions? The built environment is responsible for about 40% of our domestic carbon emissions. So in trying to answer that question and understand the materials that went into the built environment before the Industrial Revolution, the answer in a retrospective view is quite obvious. People built with what they had around them. They built with the earth. In some regions, they might use compressed earth. In other regions, they might use straw, stone, mined minerals like lime. These are heritage-based materials that tend to have lower carbon footprints just by virtue of being earth-based. I was so excited about this concept that I spun it out into a thesis study called The Contemporary Relevance of Earth Architecture. And I had full intentions of becoming an architect. But my ambitions and excitement and enthusiasm around hemp as a bio-based material kind of derailed that vision for myself and led to the founding of Hempitecture. Not long after college, I began working on hemp-based buildings using hemp lime, or hempcrete as it's often referred to, a biocomposite building strategy. And so while my journey in architecture was cut short, I'm very fortunate to be joined forces with other folks who have had a lot of experience in architecture, which is who I'm joined here with today, Miss Annie Ball, who's relatively new to the team. She's our technical resource manager, and she has that architectural lens and perspective. So I'm going to turn it over to her for a brief introduction on her background and her journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Mattie. I can't say my career is fully hijacked by a unique interest, but I stuck down the avenue of architecture. So my background for the past 10 years, been working in designing and architecture, worked for firms in Chicago and New York, but more recently have entered this kind of sustainability focused space during COVID, impulse decision to apply for a second master's in materials science. So within my architectural background, I've always felt that buildings are nothing but materials in transit. So understanding where those materials come from, how they're sourced. So kind of a manufacturing mindset in the architectural world. But anyway, so when entering my material science master's program, I had the opportunity to focus on ways in which we could build cleaner, looking at the material composition. So looking more at the micro level and then seeing how you could transcend scale. So it was great to come across Mattie and his team, and I feel like it's been an amazing alignment with both material science and architecture. So happy to kind of be the conduit of professional experience and insight to the team. But yeah, it's been great so far.
Yeah, and I love the fact that both of you have the way you put it is beautiful, the architectural lens. So you're looking through the lens at what you see on a day-to-day basis on the manufacturing and the materials side through that lens of the designer that's going to use that material. And then now you can make that transition and have that conversation and that dialogue. And so I'm really excited about that today. And then now, as far as the business development side of things, there's an idea that comes in, and then a lot of times architects are called on to perform a function, either to be sustainable, to be healthy, to sequester carbon, to do all the things that you just mentioned were important to you. Do you see a lot of that in when people come to you on wanting to fill those needs? Is that a dialogue that you've had some good stories on or good experiences as far as that initial thought and how it comes in? And I love that y'all have the niche that you do have, because I'm fond of saying the riches are in the niches. And I know there's a lot of people that enjoy the design side, enjoy the building science side. And I think there's a blue oceans of opportunity for people to come in, whether it's the data calculations, whether it's the load, the design, all of those things come into play. Do you have any examples of that stand out?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ray. And maybe let me frame my response to that question and sort of looking back at what Hempitecture has done in the past and looking forward to what we do today and how we're moving forward into the future. You mentioned, the scope of work that architects have and the demands that they have. When Hempitecture began, we really were focused on hemp lime, or hempcrete, as it's often referred to, which is more of a whole systems approach to building. And so it's not just replacing one material. It's not necessarily a drop-in replacement. I think today it's been advanced in that regard where it can be used more as a drop-in replacement. But what we saw early on was we were asking a lot of architects. We were asking them to change their framing methodologies. We're asking them to change the buildups within wall assemblies, versus just giving one material and saying, hey, let's substitute, say, a spray foam or a mineral wool insulation or a fiberglass insulation. It was really a whole systems approach to building. Now, let me just emphasize, I think hempcrete is a fantastic building approach. I think there's tremendous opportunity there, but we saw resistance early on with architects adopting it for those reasons. And then that also translates beyond the architect's desk. Let's say, for instance, an architect has to design a building. Well, maybe they're coming up with not just the structure, but the form, how it all comes together into different materials, the spatial configuration. But then they have to get that off of their desk and give it to a structural engineer. When you bring in a material like hemp lime or hempcrete, some of the structural engineering has to be changed to accommodate for hempcrete or hemp lime. And then once that hurdle is crossed with the structural engineer, then it maybe goes into the field. And then you're asking contractors in the field to do things a little bit different. Maybe you want to rely on a concrete contractor for your hempcrete. There might have to be some education involved in teaching them how to utilize this new material. So those small changes over different segments of the design delivery process add up to a big change and a big ask. Whereas Hempitecture today more so tries to fill a parking space within the built environment and an envelope, specifically one-to-one substitutions. How can we take out a material with high embodied carbon and replace it with a carbon negative material or a low embodied carbon material that is made with natural materials or earthen materials? Today, that's the form that Hempitecture has taken, producing bats, boards, products that, again, are one-to-one substitutions and don't require the architect or the engineer or even the subcontractor to do things in a radically different method.
Just use this instead of this, and then this is how you calculate that. Now we'll get to the calculations in a minute, but then talk a little bit more about discovering hemp. I know in the bio-based building materials, there's a lot of different options. Talk a little bit about the journey into that discovery.
Yeah, great question, Ray. I'm going to actually pass this over to Annie because I want to emphasize she has not one, but two masters, and with a focus on material science and architecture. So I think her perspective is probably a little bit more unique than mine, as she's looked at a broader landscape of materials than I have, just looking at really bio-based materials and really being single-handedly focused on hemp fiber since 2013.
So he's going to be like fact checking me along the way and focus. I want to mention that all of my studies focused around like concrete and steel compositions. However, it's been great to kind of step into the bio-based sphere just because. So when you look at the building envelope, insulation is a critical element to it. And so it's an opportunity to not only have operational carbon savings, but also embodied carbon savings. So having materials that can serve both functions is incredibly impactful long term. So kind of stepping back to just hemp itself as a material, just the plant, the shoots of the hemp plant, that's where you're going to get the most like rigidity and potential for the fiber. And then when we have it farmed, we're able to kind of debale it. And then in this process, start to introduce whether it's other supplement materials, but enhance overall thermal qualities or fire resistance to help then long term as we kind of rebale it, kind of compact it, bake it, to then have higher outcomes for our building and long-term benefits. But yes, it's kind of looking at, it's really like farm to table, but it's now literally farm to building envelope long-term. But
absolutely, yeah.
That's my spark notes.
We like to say at Hempitecture, our materials start with the seed, because it is true.
Yeah,
They're grown by farmers. Concrete, as Annie studied in her master's program, it's mined materials. It's high temperatures. It's high embodied carbon. Whereas we're making our products, starting with the seed in the field, we're utilizing the power of photosynthesis, the furnace in the sky, so to speak, the sun, to grow our materials. That has a way different impact on the overall life cycle and environmental product footprint than using high energy, high heat, mined materials.
Correct.
Yeah, like the furnace in the sky, where you're harnessing the power of nature and working with it instead of working against it.
Absolutely.
Annie, did you started to say something? I think I jumped in.
Oh no, I was just then gonna kind of highlight too, just with the embodied carbon story, when past experiences I've had, working with teams to kind of analyze the envelope. The two systems we immediately try to tackle is the structure and the envelope itself. And so looking at structure, it's, what's the composition of your concrete, how's it being sourced, and then, how much energy is going into that. And so again, coming back to the manufacturing process for hemp-based products, it's a far more lean energy usage, which is very impactful long term. I think other manufacturing streams are really, that's a difficulty. I mean, there's a lot of energy going into the process of making these materials, which is necessary, but it's like, how do you start to, whether it's, arc furnaces, or start to decouple the gray or toxic energy sources. So that's something that's great, where it's looking at the process line and already it's a very green system that we're working in. So.
Yeah, and a lot of it is, you talk about concrete, and then they're the face of the naughty boy community, right? All the energy that goes into that, the curing it, the pouring it, everything like that. And then if they can just be less, it's not like we have to erase it all together all at once, but if we can just have it be a little bit less and a little bit less, and then that incremental improvement, and then you translate that to the other materials that y'all have, then that's something that really adds up little bit by little bit.
Well, and something else to highlight, ultimately architects and I can't formally call myself an architect because I'm still in the process of licensure. But at the end of the day, there are, three critical items that they're going to want with their buildings. Number one is it's safe. Number two is it comfortable. And number three, it's I had a boss that once said, the most sustainable building is one that is not built. But, we all work in an industry where that can't be feasible. However, if you can really streamline, where those materials come from, being incredibly conscious and making sure then from a performative standpoint, there's no kind of drop off, because that's ultimately the difficulty with looking at new combinations for SCMs and concretes and kind of coming back to insulation as a building material. I think what's great about Hempitecture is that, we're becoming neck and neck with our performative properties with other, insulation manufacturing groups, which that's how it should be. You want to be able to look at a product list and be like, okay, great. Like default this, it's hitting on the performative features, but then at the end of the day, like, embodied carbon, it's just going to outperform others. So that's really exciting to kind of get into the meat of, the performative aspects, because that's going to be vital for everything.
Right. And you've got the blend of form and function when you're putting things together. And then I like the comment about the best house is the one that's not built. And then there's also one that I like from a colleague. It's like we build these perfectly good homes and then we ruin them by poking windows in them. And so it's at some point you do need the sunlight to come in. And so now, Mattie, talk a little bit about the picking hemp and the insulation. Like a teaser to some of our other podcasts, we're talking about bio additives that will go into actual concrete and then improve that, along with, instead of using just Portland, there can be pozzolans, there can be bio fillers in those as well that make good progress. But what drew you to focus on the insulation? Was it a transition from the hempcrete discovery into, hey, let's just make a bat that's got less of a distance to travel? Tell us a little bit about that discovery and how that would relate to somebody who's discovering this maybe for the first time listening to this.
Sure. So going back to that origin story of a focus on hemp lime, one of the key things is, what is hemp lime doing? It's providing insulation for your structure. Now there's multiple benefits to that one material, replacing other materials like a weather-resistant barrier, eliminating, maybe shear panel or OSB, kind of solving for multiple materials in one. But at the end of the day, you're creating a thermal mass wall system that is highly efficient. Going back to the challenges in having an architect do something different, a structural engineer do something different, a subcontractor do something different, we said, how can we hone in on the key value proposition of this bio-based material, hemp lime? Okay, let's come up with a natural fiber insulation that is more of a drop-in replacement, that one-to-one. So how do we take out the spray foam, take out the mineral, take out the fiberglass, and improve that? And he was just speaking before to the performative qualities. We're working really hard on ensuring that our products are meeting the performative qualities that mineral fiber has or that fiberglass has, with also value added benefits. So by putting a bio-based low carbon material into that one-to-one replacement form, you can really increase the scale of adoption. When I look back at the early days of Hempitecture, maybe we're building 1-2 hempcrete homes a year, but we're a public benefit corporation. Our mission is to benefit people and planet through the sequestration of carbon dioxide into building materials. Are you really achieving that goal if you're only building 1 or 2 homes per year? Well, now fast forward to today, we serve thousands of projects coast to coast, from Maine to Florida, from Washington to Texas, and everywhere in between. The rate of adoption can be so much higher with that one-to-one replacement concept. And it did start with a bat insulation. When we set out to build our manufacturing plant, and probably one of the more difficult times to build a manufacturing plant during COVID, where there were immense supply chain disruptions, we were really focused on that product offering. But today we've expanded that focus to rigid board, carpet underlayment, blowable insulation. One home or building might have 3-4 different types of insulation. Our goal is to create a more sustainable alternative to those conventional installations so that we can occupy all of those different parking spaces within a built envelope, whether it's floors, walls, ceilings. And Ray, I also want to just pick up on that idea of incremental improvement. At our core, we're a manufacturing company. We manufacture products. In the world of manufacturing, there's an idea of continuous improvement. Even when you think you've hit the ceiling of performance or throughput or efficiency, there's always ways to find more efficiency. And we don't want to ask people to reinvent the wheel with the materials that they prescribe into their envelope, but we think we offer easily implementable solutions that can drive incremental improvement. And when you add up that incremental improvement over thousands of homes, that equates to thousands of pounds of carbon dioxide mitigated, stored. That equates to contributing to economic vitality in rural communities. Without us as buyers of hemp fiber, there would probably be a lot less industrial hemp cultivated, because for that to be economically feasible, the farmers and I guess I would call it upstream processors need to be able to sell all the plant part constituents. And so our business has those benefits to supporting rural agriculture while driving incremental improvement in envelopes that add up to big changes overall.
Yeah, and it's a very romantic idea, and it's one that I've had the privilege to experience all the way from the job site. I've worked with your product. It's used in conjunction with hempcrete. It's not just one or the other. It weight calculations are very similar, if not identical, to fiberglass. And so when you're putting it up in a ceiling or something where weight really becomes an issue when it's overhead, then the challenges of hempcrete leave, and then the ease of operation with hemp wool come into play. And so having that bio-based filler up there, but then also being able to meet the farmers that actually grew your product, that is, so if you've ever worked with your product versus a fiberglass product, oh my gosh, you'll never work with a fiberglass product if you have any say in it all, because it's just torture to work with that stuff. The respirators that you have to wear, and the itchiness and all of that, just from the standpoint of the installer and the subcontractor. But I do enjoy seeing the effect on the rural communities as well. And so I think that's something that I really give high marks to you guys for seeing all of those different points of influence, and then having those be of value to you. So let's talk a little bit about the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts of calculations. And if an architect is asked to do something sustainable, well, they need to quantify that. And there's a lot of the software that does that, especially on commercial projects where they're going for LEED certification. I'll leave that as an open topic for you to take in any order that you'd like. What are you seeing as far as how to calculate that in the amount of carbon or the environmental side of things?
So it is very important to quantify and measure. And one thing that I can speak to is the ongoing processes that we're working through, which involve life cycle analysis to EPDs, but then how those EPDs are translated into tangible benefits to projects, and maybe how they integrate to LEED. Annie would be better off to speak to. So let me just pick up on the LCA. We're tracking every bit of data that we can: energy consumption, amount of pounds of fiber consumed, distance that the fiber travels, the amount of fuel that's consumed in that transportation, our facilities' energy consumption, our facilities' natural gas consumption. All of that has to be built into what's considered a functional unit. So an LCA is all based around a functional unit. And we're really excited to be rounding the corner on a environmental product declaration first, for which will then segue into plant panel insulation. But I think it is important to architects. I think it's something that they're looking at today. and maybe it even offers a benefit to lead points. Is that right?
Yeah. Just to kind of speak to larger tabulating, tracking. So I would say architectural industry, I think, is definitely putting in the legwork to really move the needle with how to be tracking their carbon footprint. I think EPDs are kind of the first of many strategies behind that. EPDs are becoming like, I've heard it thrown around, it's like the nutrition list of all your building materials. And EPDs are being affiliated with like insulation, concrete mixes, your structure, pretty much anywhere you can get them. They're going to increase the chance of the architect specifying them in their product or in their projects. This is becoming standard depending on the client. There's been expectations from a lot of universities that, and I think they oftentimes will probably lean into structures like LEED certification or a living building challenge or passive house to help kind of facilitate that sustainability conversation. Previous experience I've had as a sustainability consultant, we would help kind of shepherd the architectural team through that process. Now, having been on the architecture side of things, I've worked at firms where we've had a lot of in-house tabulating. So that gets factored into like our Revit models. And so, making sure within our product lines, we're including all of our sustainability data, but just the performance requirements. So when they run, if they hand off their Revit model to do like an LCA calc with like one click or some other subsequent consultant, we have that information available. So I think with technology, it's amazing. There's a lot of platforms out there. So we're just kind of doing our part from a product side to be accessible everywhere, just because we want to be tracking, feeding all the architects appropriate information, the right information they need to be building like clean buildings. Starting at their specification, that's where we want to be. A lot of great platforms out there, a lot of different avenues. I think for us, we're trying to align with kind of the most efficient methods and means, but really kind of capture, big umbrella strategies where can kind of fall into place with that.
Unpack that consultancy a little bit more, because I like that term, because when we come into this as building professionals, as designers, as suppliers, there's things that we want to do. These are the novel ideas, we want to see this happen in the world, but then there's the practical side. It's like, we've got exposure. There's liability. It has to perform. It has to be certain things, and it has to not be certain things. So if an architect is coming into this space, what are some of the points that are common questions or points of concern that you've helped, and some of those ways that you've helped them?
Yeah, I'll speak generally, and then I'll let Mattie kind of speak more like product specific. So I think more than not, unfortunately, the first question when it comes to sustainability is how much is it going to cost? I've been the architect or on the architectural side of things. I've been on the consultant side, working with the client. At the end of the day, it has to be financially in alignment with what the client wants. Now, then that's where it's fun to be creative. There's a lot of ways to achieve it. And so I think that's where your consultant or the design team, that's where you really have to step in and assist. And so it's really addressing that first-handedly. And so I think when consulting, a lot of the time had been looking at energy models, running quick simulations of, just based upon the systems you're looking at, the scale of your building. These are the kind of overall benchmarks for how much energy your building's going to be producing, what's the cost of your utilities. And so then when looking at a product, it's like, okay, well, based on, these green building products that have these great R values, look at the drop, in overall cost. Because I think always, and ever since I entered architecture, clients are really like, they rear their head at the number, but it's like, it's educating and showing the long-term benefit. It's just being well versed in that strategy when communicating, and then just demonstrating there's a lot of avenues to do it. It's not just, it's looking at systems, looking at your envelope, looking at your window to wall ratio, then what's within the envelope, what are you specifying? Just simple as build an orientation. We've had a lot of clients where I'd be on teams that at the end of the day, they would call it, we want a LEED ready building. So they want to pay for the certification, but we'd walk them through and we'd assist them with specifying, different, plumbing systems or having fixtures that were all water sense labeled, even though at the end of the day, they maybe didn't want to track or get the plaque. Operationally, it was going to perform that way. So yeah, I think there's a great opportunity, but it's just like, it's it's kind of walking them back and showing the financial benefit. That's been the unfortunate, firsthand experience for me when dealing with like cost and sustainability and kind of consulting in that regard.
Yeah, I've heard put to me by an architect firm who is designing really large energy intensive buildings, maybe kind of data center analogous. Everybody wants low embodied carbon, sustainable materials. They want it yesterday, but they want it at the same or better cost than the incumbent materials. That is kind of the crux of the challenge that we face. And not just at Hempitecture, but I think within the bio-based arena as a whole. Generally, bio-based materials are produced at a smaller scale. They're newer in the market, and that smaller scale and rate of production probably means a higher cost of goods into making those products compared to, say, a mineral wool company or a fiberglass company, where their CapEx for one plant alone probably starts around $250 million. They're planning on running 24/7, 365, and their throughput is immense. With that immense throughput, they're able to have very low rates and costs for their products, but you lose those sustainability benefits in some cases. So, and spoke to the importance of education. That is really one of our key jobs at Hempitecture, is to educate folks on what is the value add to a material that maybe is 10, 15% more expensive today. How does that add up to value in the project as a whole? I think there's been some studies done on the resale value of passive houses. Generally, passive houses tend to resell for more money down the line than a conventionally built home. But are you willing to bear that cost early on in the early construction design and implementation phase? That's a question that's difficult to answer. We do recognize the long-term importance of being at price parity. We've experimented with different pricing. We're working on bringing down our pricing over time. But again, these come with operational efficiency gains. They come with time. They come with scale. So today, it can be a difficult ask for people to achieve what, as I encapsulated before, that architect said, we want low embodied carbon materials. We want them yesterday. We want them at the same price. Well, maybe there's trade-offs along the way that can allow you to find value in that 10, 15, maybe 20% more price premium per square foot relative to conventional products. That's part of why we're here today, to have that conversation, share our perspectives, and educate the architectural specification community on some of the benefits of these natural materials.
And you've talked a little bit about the health. You can unpack that a little bit more. We've talked about the life cycle analysis and the environmental product declaration. And I know many times people are motivated by a natural fiber product, something that's not off-gassing, just synthetic harmful fumes. And do you have any data on that, or any just stories that you'd like to share about clients that approached you for that type of sensitivity to other synthetic materials?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to tie health of material to performance a little bit in my response. So we do have kind of an early adopter customer base that is highly motivated by health, whether it is being formaldehyde free, low, no VOC, looking to replace materials that might have inorganic materials within them. People are excited about the idea of a bio-based product. Now, a lot of people come to us and say, we want a material with no chemical whatsoever. And this is where that performance attribute comes in. When it comes to performance, one of the things that, to be completely candid, has been one of our biggest, I'd say, challenges, but also opportunities, is enhancing the flame spread. Natural fibers inherently have to be treated with some sort of material to enhance flame spread. Let's look at cellulose insulation, a prolifically used and maybe the original bio-based material. Recycled paper, recycled cardboard. 10 to 15% of the content of that is boric acid, or maybe other borate-based materials, maybe ammonium phosphate. Those materials are required for the enhanced ASTM E84 flame spread of those materials, yet it's still viewed as a healthy bio-based material. We are now enhancing and fortifying our fibers with bio-based chemicals to treat for flame spread and open up more doors that have previously been closed to us. Primarily in residential, we're good to go. There are sometimes conversations that have to be had with building inspectors or local municipalities, but we are seeing a lot of customers come to us and say, I heard you're making treated fiber. Can you still sell us a non-treated material? It's going to be within a Class A assembly under drywall with a non-combustible outboard material. We just don't want the chemicals. That's something that we intend to continue to offer in the future, but to open up more doors, we have to add chemicals. Now, we've gone through all the different sort of rating programs, whether it's Red List or Declare, to identify what materials can be used that would not violate those conditions of a Declare label or Red List ingredient, to come up with, let's say, a healthy application of a chemical that meets flame spread requirements. So that's been the crux of one of our challenges, and something that, again, candidly, it was maybe a weak point of our product. Today, we've now solved that and are working on actively relaunching our product catalog with these enhanced flame spread ratings. But we also understand, while that will open doors, there's always going to be folks that want a chemical-free material. And so long as the detailing is correct, because the devil is always in the details, as long as the detailing is correct, that will remain an option for customers to use.
What are some of the other high points that when you interact with architects that they're seeing, maybe they discover it when they start engaging with you? Are there any other of the high points that are the real aha moment takeaways?
I would say I'll break that into both the architecture and on the implementation side. And I'll start with the implementation side, meaning the contractor in the field. And I'll tie that to a very specific story. We once supplied material to a project for that installation. It was at the client's request. The client substituted fiberglass after she learned that it had some formaldehyde in it, which almost all fiberglass does have formaldehyde in it. There's only one company that's made a commitment for 2030 to eliminate formaldehyde from their product offerings. So you can assume that all fiberglass use will have that formaldehyde. Now, going back to that story specifically, this customer requested our product, but the contractor was very unenthused to have a new material that he didn't know how quickly he could install it, what the impact on its budget would be. And I remember the day that this material was delivered to the job site, the contractor was frustrated for a number of reasons, but mostly because he didn't want to do something new. After a week of putting this material,
I know that guy. I've met him 1,000 times. Yeah,
exactly. It's in the building industry. I mean, there's a reason that the building industry is slow to change. I think it's the segmentation of the building industry that's incredibly unique, where it's so broken up across different, parts of delivery, from architect to structural engineer to the people putting it in the wall. And so this contractor called us after a week of installing it, and he said he actually let his installation subcontractor go. They removed them from the project because he realized that the material was so easy to install that he was able to use his own labor to put it in and work at a pace that worked for them. Whereas in the past, you have an installation crew come in for, let's say, 1 week. Everything has to be ready. Everything has to be ready for cover. They can't just selectively pick off walls and say, we're going to put insulation here. He was able to save a lot of money by just using his own in-house labor, because his own in-house labor, once they got the fundamentals down of cutting, placing, working around electrical, things like that, it was a value add to use our product. No gloves required, no mask required, although we always do recommend people use PPE per their local guidance and regulations and things that are going to be best for them and their own individual health. But when you compare it to the incumbent materials that they were replacing with hemp wool, they found that it was an easier install. Those stories, that happens time and time again for us. So people become excited about that. Going to the architectural specification side, when people learn that the material is largely performance comparable, it makes that conversation much easier. There are also some other elements to insulation that I think are important to highlight. If you or I go into Home Depot and you walk down the insulation aisle, you will see an R value rating on a bag of insulation. The average consumer will just look at that R value and say, should I buy the R4 or the R5? Well, R value is just one small component of the overall kind of pie chart that makes up insulation performance. And unfortunately, the other components are a bit more difficult concepts to grasp. One characteristic that our materials really have to conventional materials is phase shift resistance. Our materials are able to hold and store heat and release them with more lag time than, say, a fiberglass or let's say a foam board. Foam board might have a phenomenal R value on face value, but very low shift resistance, very low thermal inertia. So when we are able to speak to architects and highlight, hey, there's other benefits beyond that. If you were to look at your building envelope from a more holistic point of view, which it is ask, it is a lift for architects, because most of the time it's what is the R value, what is the depth of insulation, check that box, move on. But when you look at it from a more holistic point of view, whole home energy monitoring and modeling, Annie earlier was speaking to siting, harnessing sun, passive solar gain. Our materials really interact well with these real world conditions, whereas R value is just one sort of laboratory condition that doesn't always accurately reflect reality. So again, that's education, that's speaking to the architects, speaking to the specifiers, and going a bit beyond just the R value label on a bag of insulation.
What are some of the key points for the specifiers? Because I know that'll be a point of interest, because many of the architects in the world fill that role. What are some of the key points that are of concern?
That's a great question, Ray. I mean, we keep coming back to cost. Cost is always a big one. But I think the other one might be, how does it contribute to other product or project rather goals? So Annie, when it comes to LEED, what are architects thinking about, and how does insulation play into that?
Yeah, I think in terms of LEED specifically, there are subsequent category, it's a big, checklist of things you need to integrate into the composition of your building and the site. But when it comes to insulation, I would think, it's coming back to, how clean and where are these materials sourced from. So again, it's like EPDs, HPDs are really important. It tells you the composition of your product and, whether it has VOCs or not. And then I think at the end of the day, it's layering and understanding your energy model performance. Making sure you've analyzed, you talked with your client about, okay, what are the metrics we're trying to hit, and making sure those are being achieved. And so that's where I think insulation kind of sneaks through at times, or at least when I've been in those conversations, it's actually like, that's a big contributor. I've been on a project where, just swapping out a different material in the metal panel insulation value, that made a big energy savings. So getting that granular, I think, is really vital. And then, obviously, if it's LEED specific, it's diving into each credit thoroughly to highlight that. But yeah, there's a lot of things I would say on that front.
One thing that I am passionate about, if anybody looking from the building industry at the bio-based building material sector, that building professional, whether they're design, engineer, fulfillment, subcontractors, they need to see us as ready. And if you don't see Tommy and Mattie and Annie as ready, you're just not looking right. And so it's one of those things that I'm really excited for this conversation to come full circle right now, as of go back to several years ago. It's been nice to be along for the process along the way. And so I'm a huge fan, and that word ready is something that I echo in there. Now, tell us a little bit more about your systems, and just briefly on that, if people do want to click and buy, how do they go about that? Do y'all have any distribution hubs, or is it something that they have to order ahead of time? How does that work?
Yeah, we have a very unique model when it comes to selling insulation. We've set ourselves up as a direct-to-consumer company first, and we've leveraged the power of technology to make that possible. We've created an online, what we call buy direct platform that integrates both quoting, so enter your amount of square footage required, depth of insulation, stud bay spacing, to output the amount of material needed. And then that's integrated with freight APIs that calculate the amount of freight needed to get that product from the nearest warehouse to you. To support that platform, we've developed a network of 3PLs, third-party logistics centers, that stock our insulation coast to coast. We have 7, 8 different 3PL locations across the country, because we've learned that if someone sees a shipping cost in Florida, say from our Idaho manufacturing plant, there's quite a bit of sticker shock. That sticker shock results in abandoned carts, people not converting into an order. And so we have set up this network to really kind of make it easier than ever before to purchase insulation. I think in the past, you always had to go through a distributor, or you could go to Home Depot and buy it on the shelves. We're not on the shelves of Home Depot or Lowe's just yet, although that could be a future part of our strategy as we continue to grow. But by being a D2C business first, we're better able to service customers. We have a direct relationship with those customers. They can call us, we'll answer the phone, answer their questions, help them facilitate their order through our Buy Direct platform, or if they're uncomfortable with that, walk them through the process, give them an invoice, and make sure that the products are available and ready for them for use on site as they need it. That is a big challenge in the building material world. You need to have materials on site when it's ready to be installed, not 4 weeks early or 4 weeks late. And so we've had to really learn that process and perfect that process. As we move forward, I think distribution absolutely remains an avenue that will be open to us, and more B2B relationships can be developed to support larger offtake of our materials. But by positioning ourselves as a D2C customer first, business first, we like to think that our customers have a better experience, more accessibility to our products. And it's as easy as really adding something to your Amazon cart and checking out. That's a fundamentally new concept within the insulation space. And I wouldn't be surprised if other larger companies adopted that sort of platform in the future.
Right. And so you not only have the availability and the readiness, but you've got that specific pathway to engagement for that design professional who's the specifier, who's then going to need to be a part of the delivery and the support of that as well. And so the architect's job is not over once the plans are drawn. They're responsible for the vertical of that, and that in many cases. And so you're there every step of the way on that, and there's good tools in the toolbox. I tell you what, go through some of your products behind you there on the stud, the hollow stud, the traditional 1-to-1, and I know you've got some exciting new stuff come out. And then if you would, because these AIA continuing education, they're not always product specific. You've got a product in mind that these are that are being created in manufacturing space. Y'all are just leading the way. But talk and compare about some of the other options that are out there. You mentioned cellulose and things like that, just so people can have a little bit of apples to apples. But we're excited to see what you've got behind you.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who can't see behind us, might be listening in, we have a 2x4 16-inch on center framed wall with bat insulation, cavity bat insulation. That's called hemp wool. That is a friction fit material that is designed for some recovery and rebound. So when the material is placed into the stud bay cavity, it stays snug. It doesn't fall or slump in the cavity over time. It'll hold that position in the cavity for efficient insulation. Now, that is for exterior walls, but within the framing dimensions. It could be for interior walls, partition walls, primarily for acoustic insulation, but we can also service walls, floors, and ceilings. So generally, our insulation can flex to different depths of dimensions for different framing. Let's say you're building with a 2x8 joist. We have materials that can fit that with a 7.5-inch thickness. And our material can also be layered. So if you're building beyond 7.5 inches, let's say with a 2x12 or an engineered joist, you can stack insulation to fill out that cavity. We have a plant panel semi-rigid board insulation produced at 115 kg per meter cube, which is around 7 pounds per cubic foot density, in line with comfort board, rock wool, mineral board types for exterior continuous insulation. I think the easiest way to think of continuous insulation is sort of like a blanket that goes around your building that eliminates thermal bridging on the studs. We have a natural fiber carpet underlayment that can be used in a few different scenarios. Of course, carpet underlayment, but also for acoustic attenuation and cross-laminated timber buildups. We have under development, a blowable natural fiber insulation, which you can purchase today to fill maybe trickier walls that maybe aren't so appropriate for bats, where, let's say you have a lot of MEP. Working around that with the bat is not feasible. You can blow in this insulation. But to answer your question on kind of the landscape of bio-based materials as a whole and just speak to that, of course, we're biased and think that there are tremendous benefits to using a natural fiber insulation, primarily from hemp fiber. There are a multitude of other options out there. And I would encourage the specifiers listening in to think when they think of insulation, think bio-based. It could be cellulose, it could be denim, it could be sheep's wool. There's a lot of different opportunities out there in the market today, and that market segment is evolving rapidly. There's always going to be pros and cons to different materials. Some might be recycled but have a higher carbon footprint. Some might have a low carbon footprint, but that carbon sequestration is, say, over 30 or 40 years from a timber resource. I would encourage people to think of bio-based first, and then look at the performance attributes, look at the cost per performance, and think about the materials holistically. We also do encourage people to think regionally. Maybe if you're in one location and there's a manufacturer down the street, maybe that's a good option for you. We've tried to upend that a bit with our 3PL distribution model, where basically no matter where you are in the country, you're close to Hempitecture products. But thinking regionally and cutting down on transportation, that could be a great way to mitigate your project's carbon impacts. But I think bio-based as a whole represents an exciting opportunity and a direction that the building material industry has been looking for and is excited to see at scale, and also price parity. It, again, takes time. I think we're getting there currently. But when thinking about insulation, think bio-based first, and then think about what other attributes are important to you and your client.
I like how you express that. This is how you think this product. This is how you think these systems. And so it's boiled down to a manner in which you think about these different products that we use in the built space. And then just going back to the anecdote of the installer, you're at very near parity with other materials, and then they were able to save on their installation, and so now they're back to actual parity with the cost. And then when you add in the convenience of doing that in-house versus needing to outsource it, well, now you're in the plus side on all those things. So there's several different layers to the onion, whether it's job site logistics, whether it's purchasing, whether it's classifying everything. There's a lot of different aspects to think about, but once you know all of them, well, now you can make good informed decisions, and that's what we're here for. Are there any other points of information that you really want people to have when they think those thoughts and make those decisions? Maybe connecting some of the dots, maybe there's a story in there.
Yeah, I would say, I think when working on a project, when delivering a project, it is important to connect the dots and make sure that everyone is informed along that kind of segmented process, from architecture to structural engineer, energy modeling, and the subcontractor. I think clear communication early on helps alleviate concerns and helps people wrap their minds around a new product. Because again, I think if people are unfamiliar with the product, there's going to be more resistance. The more lead time that you put on your subcontractor's radar, the more they can wrap their head around it. They can pick up the phone and call us and ask for recommendations or tools or tricks of the trade to make their project installation more efficient. But I think in the world of segmented project delivery, having that clear line of communication from client through all steps to a finished product is super important, and ultimately opens the door to new material opportunities. Whereas in the past, it's, I've never used this before, I don't want to use it today. Times are changing. People are more acutely aware that we spend 98% of our lives indoors, and the materials that we surround ourselves with are really, really important. So why not choose a healthier, high-value material that's good for both people and planet?
Yeah, the market is definitely driving that, and I see the demand for it and you mentioned that, you know, the houses built with those type of materials where decisions get made sell for more. And with my real estate background, I can tell you that if you do have somebody who has that value, or maybe they have that type of need, maybe there's a hypersensitivity to other synthetic materials, man, you better believe that's a good value that actually translates into dollar values. And so those are all good points to wrap up. Any other parting thoughts or conclusions, the questions that you'd like the architecture community to have in their mind with an answer rolling around from you?
Well, I had an additional thought before you asked that great question. One thing I just wanted to add, I think, you know, within the AEC industry, I think, you know, architects doing a great job with, you know, really diving in from a sustainability and, you know, carbon tracking story. You know, you're looking at the envelope, right? You're looking at structure, you're looking at, you know, where these things are coming from. And then it's just like taking that a step further and really like following through with the specification process. I know it's complicated, it's tedious, but really that's, I think, where the change happens. And so in addition to, you know, running LCAs on your projects or talking with other, you know, sustainability consultants, it's really as an office thinking about, you know, what are your standard specs? How could we actually like integrate like green performance measures, whether it's, you know, looking at specific products and introducing those, or just like overall performance specs, you know, making sure, you know, you're being really critical with what's being said. So, you know, that's where you're laying the groundwork for making change. It's like with your spec writers. So that maybe that's a shout out, because I'd really experienced at my first job with my spec writer, but that's where a lot of our changes were made as a firm. So something to think about.
You had some advice for somebody wanting to carve out a niche in this space, whether they're spec writing or doing any type of product development with you guys or on their own or anything like that. Based on your journey, Annie, what advice would you give on that?
Oh gosh. Well, I would say I think we all innately have, you know, core interests and values. And I would say this to my students I would teach, but, you know, in school and academic settings, you're kind of, you know, in this environment, you like absorb a lot, you know, and you're taking in all this exciting information. But I think once you start working, it actually is quite the opposite. You kind of need to like protect and combat those like core values, and continue to just like revisit, you know, are these meeting, you know, my professional values, my sustainability mindset? And maybe I'm just like projecting my own path, but that was something where, okay, how could I actually be more sustainability focused? Okay, I work at a great sustainability focused firm. We design net zero buildings. Okay, well, how could I do more? And so the question is, you know, look at your day to day and see where there's opportunities to make a difference, as we kind of said throughout this whole conversation, it's like those small efforts really can compile into something really significant. So I think as an industry, if we kind of look at our roles, whether it's within them and continue to kind of question and look at the opportunities, or maybe looking to expand, it's like, where are there gaps within your company? Like take advantage of how that could be a new learning opportunity or educational advantage for your group. So yeah, I would continue to like listen to, that innate like intuition you might have. And then, try to find like-minded individuals. So I guess that's where I've kind of landed myself. But I think there's like huge merit to that and great things to learn from one another and changes to make too within the industry.
Yeah, it's become such a common trend that it's almost cliche, but I truly love as a corporation and as an individual going through, and you mentioned that word values. It's like, what are my values? What are the values of the corporation and the company that I'm going to work with or going to start? And then I've heard it time and time again where people make their decisions, whether what to do in business, to go a certain way or to not, to hire a person or not. And then it's like, does that align with our values, with the values that they've set out there? And I think that is a good place to begin and end, and then use daily. And so for folks that are living the value system that they put out there, kudos to you. One final question is, what are some of the things that you're most excited seeing made out of hemp?
Oh man, it's a great question. There's so much potential, and I think that potential transcends the built environment. Our core focus is the built environment, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. We talked a lot today about continuous improvement. Hemp for us really is the carbon capturing vehicle that goes into our products, but there is also a world in which other materials come together with hemp to create a stronger material profile. That could be organic material or synthetic material. That could be composites that go into a wide range of industries. Our technology that we have here at our manufacturing facility in Idaho is flexible. And again, we service the built environment first and foremost, but non-wovens are a basis of material that can be converted into other materials, composites being one that I think is the most exciting, where you can take a hemp-based non-woven, thermoform it into something like a car door panel. And while it may sound futuristic or far off, it's actually a reality today, particularly in other countries where they're manufacturing automotive components with hemp fiber or other natural fibers like flax or jute. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity. I'd also like to see more hemp fiber in consumer packaged goods, particularly in the packaging side of things. We ship boxes all over the country and all over the world every day, and oftentimes they have to be temperature controlled. EPS, which is a styrofoam essentially, is one of the most predominant materials for insulating packages. That's a material that will never, ever biodegrade or break down once it inevitably meets landfill. So by finding natural fibers and homes for them in kind of unique industries, I think it opens up the door for different product opportunities, but also strengthening that agriculture base for industrial hemp. All of these things, they have to scale, they have to grow, and it starts at the farm level. Going back to kind of that founding story, one of the reasons that I was so drawn to hemp fiber versus other supply chains or natural materials, let's just compare it to, say, stones. Hemp is scalable. It can be flexed by acreage, whereas you have a demand in the Northeast, you can grow hemp in the Northeast. You have demand in the Southeast, you can grow hemp in the Southeast. Compared to other bio-based material that has to be pulled out of the ground, excavated, it's not as easy as just contracting more acreage, growing the amount of hemp that's grown to meet those demands, but it has to be demand driven. So by finding new opportunities and places for hemp fiber to be used, that increases the opportunity on the agricultural supply chain. And as the agricultural supply chain increases, that creates potentially economic incentives to drive down costs and make it a more price competitive product offering relative to incumbent materials.
Well said. Well, you can tell that Mattie is one of the well-spoken, articulate, original gangsters in this space, and it goes back a long way. and there's a reason that he's having the success that he's having. Mattie, Annie, thank you for joining us today. Any parting thoughts before we wrap up? This has been a great conversation.
Yes, a lot of great questions, Ray. Really appreciate all the thought and ideas. And we're looking forward to connecting with the architects and specifiers that may be listening in. We're here and ready to support with their project needs, answer their questions, introduce them and their firm to our products and our offerings. Andy brought up the idea of core values. And I think in architectural settings, it is important to maintain integrity to those core values. So it could be as simple as introducing your firm to our products with a sample kit. And whether or not it gets used, you're exercising your core values and bringing forward a new material palette to your firm. I think that's the way forward. I think that's the way that bio-based materials will see success as a whole, through more people being open, contributing to their belief system, sharing that belief system with others that they work with, and spreading the word. So thanks for the opportunity to share these ideas here today.
Done. Thanks for joining us.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you both.
Thank you.